Hello, coffee makers, not coffee takers. He is Dr. Joseph J. Burtmiller Jr., and I am the master of Cyber Farms, Alfredzo B. Nash Jr. We are your hosts of the Cyber Coffee Hour. We are two experts from Mount Vernon, New York, sharing with you our experience in this field and also the experience of others so we can learn, elevate, and ultimately realize we all belong in this space. The views and opinions are those of us, the Cyber Coffee Hour, and not those of our employers, personal or professional relationships. Today, we are going to discuss the targeting of sports teams by cybercriminals and the NBA guarding against data breaches. And to help us today, to break it down, is New York Post sports anchor Dexter Henry. How you guys doing today?
Doing good. Thank you for having me,
Great.
guys. A pleasure to be here with you guys.
Absolutely. So, Dexter Henry is an award-winning sports journalist from Brooklyn, New York, with over 18 years of experience in sports broadcast journalism. After graduating from the University of Pittsburgh in 2005, the New York City-based sports journalist has worked for outlets including SB Nation, the New York Giants, and News 12. Besides sports, the Brooklynite has also covered news and weather during his career. Dexter also was the first ever black male national weather reporter for the AccuWeather Network. In 2021, Dexter was nominated for the Stuart Scott Award by the New York Association of Black Journalists for Excellence in Sports Journalism. That same year, Dexter won a Telly Award for a short documentary, Sideline Stories, Sports Voices Matter, where he served as a correspondent and executive producer. He also hosts a digital show covering the National Basketball Association, the NBA Exchange, and is the co-host for the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. Dexter works as a sports anchor for the New York Post and Sportsnet New York. He also serves as a sports update anchor for WFAN and CBS Sports Radio. When Dexter is not telling stories about sports, he loves traveling, exercising, enjoying live music, sampling new restaurants, watching his favorite sports teams, and spending time with his family. Dexter, welcome to the Cyber Coffee Hour.
Thank you, man. Thank you guys for having me. I like that hat, Dr. Joseph. I like that. The Knicks are hot right now, so I like the hat, man. You came ready, like I expected you to.
Man, I had to come correct, man. I think this is going to be a very special episode. I'm glad you're here for it. You come in the right time because the Knicks are riding a hot win streak. So, but we can talk about that a little later.
We will.
Actually, Alfredzo, how you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there, man. Taking it one day at a time.
Got you. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this. So as Alfredzo mentioned during the intro, that we have there's been targeting by some cyber criminals against like sports teams, sports leagues, which seems to be a prevalent problem. So the first article we're going to look at is titled "Microsoft Warns of Growing Cyber Threats to Sporting Events." And the author of this is James Coker. He's a deputy editor for Infosecurity magazine. This is dated back in 4 August 2023. So I'll start with a quick excerpt. So sporting events and venues are increasingly vulnerable to cyber attacks. A new study from Microsoft has found this. The Microsoft Threat Intelligence State of Play report highlighted the growing opportunities for threat actors to target high-profile sporting events, especially those in increasingly connected environments, introducing cyber risks for organizers, regional host facilities, and attendees. Research has demonstrated rising attacks on high-profile sports events and organizations in recent years. For example, a report from the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre, or NCSC, in 2020 found that 70% of sports organizations experience at least one attack per year. So I'll do a quick stop here and let that digest, and just want to hear your thoughts on that. Alfredzo, I'll start with you first. Like, what are some of the things that come to your mind when you hear this?
What comes to mind is the facilities that, like you said, that part that stuck out was how connected these facilities are. The player tablets, the cameras, the data that's generated at every game, and also then how regionally connected they are. Stadium to stadium, stadium to back office or cloud, I would have never thought that this was a potential target until now. I mean, I've kind of considered it, but disruption to the game it comes to mind too. Like, can they disrupt a live game or live recording? Comes to mind right now, or even can they steal player stats and player data? That's what kind of comes to mind when I hear this article and the distribution of that information across regional stadiums.
Absolutely. Dexter?
When I hear this, it makes me think about, it's sports. Data is everything. Data is king right now. So many teams rely on information to make decisions, whether it's about scouting for draft picks, whether it's about studying player and tracking player movement in game and arenas, right? There's so much cameras around the arenas and capture data and biometrics and all that stuff. And teams rely on that so much in terms of making decisions about how their organization is going to run, just like any other organization. Sports is not any different from this. And then also, a lot of we have to think that sports is a business, and so many of these teams and organizations, it's not just data on players, it's data on fans, habits in the arena. What are they purchasing? These are things that are very much studied. And sometimes now with so many things, as you guys know, being the experts that you are online, you have people giving information, signing up for things, email addresses, things of that nature.
Yeah,
so there's a lot that teams and leagues have to protect. And as teams are getting more information, guys, there's more of a need for teams to protect that as well too. But on the other side, you're going to get hackers and people that are going to look to try to manipulate this information and try to profit off this information. So there's so much information in sports right now today in 2024. This, in a way, isn't shocking. I think, I'm sure we'll talk more about this. It's just what are teams going to do to protect themselves, because that information is so valuable, and it is so key in sports. Stats and data mean everything. So the key question is, how good are teams going to protect? How good are the leagues going to protect? Because leagues don't want this at all. This affects their business. Alfredzo, you talked about it affecting broadcast information, and there are things tied into broadcasting that go through different lines and IP addresses within the stadium and all that stuff that has to be protected. So yeah, this data is key, and you got to protect it. And sports is just like any other sector of business. It's important to protect that information.
Let's take the player data. Let's take the player data first for a second. When you say the player data, right, you're talking about the in-game data, right? Scoring, stats, things like that. But what about their fitness data, gym? I mean, medical, is that also included as well in that same?
I'm including that too, because this data sometimes is not just about what happens in the game; it's about what goes on at the training facilities. That's why that's such a good point and good question for you too, because all these teams, especially now, biometric data they're studying, it's about their training regimen, how they're eating. Sleep data is very important and prevalent in sports too, right? And that might become to wearable devices that these players could take home. So there's so much that's involved in data that teams are capturing. So I think when you think about it like that, Alfredzo, it's not just what happens on the court, in the arena, or on the fields at these games. It's about the whole business of sports in terms of what happens in these practice facilities. And there's so much data that is captured through that. All these, it's just in the NBA, NFL, at these facilities, there's so much cameras tracking data, player movement. There's so much wearable things that these players and devices that players are wearing. And those are downloaded and then taken back on different devices. So yeah, it's not just at the games. That's a great point you bring up, that I don't want people to think that this is just isolated to games. Sometimes it's in the practice facilities. Sometimes it's even in the players' homes, these athletes' homes, these men and women. So yeah, protecting that data is definitely paramount.
And one thing you mentioned, Dexter, as you said, as you started out, you said, data is king. And as we know, all these players, they're working to get their stats up when we're talking about like MVPs or, all these different accolades, individual awards and also team awards. And also associated with that, there's money incentives that's tied to that. And when Alfredzo was speaking, it just made me think about, we haven't seen it, at least, thankfully as of yet, but it just made me think that, well, what if there's a situation where like someone's stats are manipulated, they tweak a couple points here and there, but it's not too crazy, like little subtle changes. Someone's not really monitoring it, and maybe try to work in favor for a player or work against a player, whatever the case may be. But again, those could be crucial. Like, 1 point can keep a player from, maybe earning the MVP award or,
Right.
different or Rookie of the
sponsorship.
Year award.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. That definitely leads to sponsorships, sneaker deals, things of that nature. And even talking about like for the NFL, as you mentioned, Dexter, the communication that's really needed for players, especially if you're talking about like quarterback. They gotta listen to the coach. They have the radio inside their helmet. What if that gets disrupted? Or what if it gets completely disrupted to where they can't even hear anything from the sideline because those lines of communications are being severed? It's. I never thought about it so much. Like when you're watching a game, you're not even thinking about all that stuff. You just enjoy the game. But but yeah, there's so much interconnectivity that goes on, especially now. All sports leagues, not even just NBA, all sports leagues have really modernized their systems, the way they, like you said, the way they prepare, as far as they're using a lot of analytics as to how to prepare for games, even practices and things of that nature. So it's definitely and as we go on here, we learn more as to why a lot of these sports leagues, these sports teams are being targeted. So continuing on with the article here. So Microsoft supported the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure at the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. During this event, Microsoft observed attackers continually attempting to compromise connected systems through identity-based attacks. Justin Turner, the principal group manager at Microsoft Security Research, told Info Security, "What we saw," and I quote, "what we saw was consistent with cyber criminals being opportunistic and seeing where they can infiltrate and find gaps between a lot of connected systems in the context of a large event. The cybercrime economy, sheer size and low barriers to entry make this kind of opportunism a significant risk to account for in planning and having layered defenses in place," he said. Numerous publicly reported sports-related cyber attacks have taken place in the last 5 years, including January 2018, Russian threat actors carried out a range of attacks designed to disrupt Pyeongchang, South Korea. In November 2020, English Premier League football giants Manchester United experienced a sophisticated cyber attack suspected to be ransomware. April 2021, U.S. National Basketball Association, or NBA, the Houston Rockets were targeted by ransomware attackers claimed to have stolen 500 gigabytes of Rockets data, including contracts, non-disclosure agreements, and financial data. Internal cyber defenses were effective in limiting the spread of ransomware on the club systems. February 2022, U.S. National Football League, or NFL, the San Francisco 49ers confirmed it was hit by a ransomware attack 1 day before the Sunday Super Bowl. March 2022, personal data belonging to American Major League Baseball, or MLB, players and their family members were reportedly stolen during a cyber attack on a third-party vendor. Sporting events face unique cybersecurity challenges due to the vast digital surface that needs to be protected with a high level of cyber-physical conversions. This means there are a range of connected devices and interconnected networks that can be exploited alongside known and unknown vulnerabilities across different venues and arenas. And I'll stop right there. Let that sink in a bit.
Yeah, that's deep.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry, Dexter. Go ahead.
No, I was when you were saying all that, I hope that some people might take is that look how much has happened in the last 3 to 4 years, right? Like we've just seen so much happen with that, even back more to go to 5 years, right? That's how much has happened and how vulnerable in different situations that could be. The other thing I think that you read there, Dr. Joseph, was the opportunistic nature of the cyber criminals here, right? You saw the 49ers who were playing in the Super Bowl again this year, and they were targeted. It's funny, they're playing the same opponent at the last Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's right.
And they were targeted the day before the Super Bowl. So whenever you have these big events, we have the Super Bowl coming up next Sunday. You talked about the World Cup recently. any of these big events, cyber criminals are looking at this as a large opportunity. Why? Because the data is so valuable. You also have more people present to steal data from around some of these events that are going on. And so the opportunity there is so good, which even tells you so much more why these teams, why these leagues have to make sure they have the infrastructure in place to protect this and also protect their fans and the paying customers, because you don't want to lose money. Again, this is a business. Sports is a business. You
Right.
don't want to have to lose money by this. So this is why the protection of it is so important. And listening to that, it made me think of a lot of things about the opportunistic nature of the cyber criminals, but also just how important it is. And clearly you can see what has happened in some of these situations where the infrastructure was in place and the threat was minimal because they had the proper cybersecurity elements in place to do so.
Alfredzo?
Yeah, I like that idea too. I mean, the mindset of it being opportunistic is, even as a defender, I wouldn't have thought a stadium was critical infrastructure. I heard it there, and I heard the interconnected pieces and the data being exchanged, but I don't know where these venues or arenas would be considered critical infrastructure or not. Like, think like a hospital or whatever. You would say, oh yeah, hospital, sure. But the stadiums, no. I would have never, until now, in the last couple of years, I would have never thought that would have been the opportunity would exist to use these stadiums and arenas and different venues, even as, side carts are connected, the POS systems, all those things in the stadium can be leveraged by these, malicious actors to get to a target they wanted, to get, even if they don't attack that venue itself, they might leverage the connectivity in there to get to somewhere else. And until now, like you said, 5 or so years, I would have never considered that critical infrastructure. That's what stuck out to me, and the opportunity you mentioned. Like, if you're a bad actor or whatever on the other side, you would say, well, I can't get to the hospital, but I can get to this venue 5 blocks away. That's a stadium, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's something I didn't know.
Something else that Dr. Joseph, you had mentioned in there too. You talked about the communication earlier with NFL and how that's something that could even be disrupted. And and it made me think about when I watch sporting games now, all these leagues, baseball, football, basketball, the major leagues, people are getting real information in real time. In baseball, sometimes after a player comes to go to bat, they go back to the dugout and you see them. They've got their iPad or Microsoft Surface tablet out and they're watching their bat, right? And they're going over with a coach. You see the same thing in football. After a series is over, they'll go back and look at it. If you disrupt that, if you get that data, then they no longer have this communication. That changes everything in the game. Now, one team could be playing with an unfair advantage, right? That's just one simple thing I'm talking about. One team's communication gets disrupted. That affects the whole game. It compromises the integrity of the game, actually, when you think about it, when it goes to that level. So, yeah, this is why this stuff is so important, and even in sports.
I think Alfredzo, I know you mentioned not thinking about sports arenas as critical infrastructure. I think we even have to change our thought process when we're using the term critical infrastructure as it pertains to sports. Because if you think about it, if you took out the power for an arena, let's say for a football arena, because they mainly play outside, or even any arena, honestly, they can't play.
Right.
Because I remember, I don't know if it was that same Super Bowl. Didn't the power go out?
It was that same
49ers.
It was that same one, actually. Yep.
Yeah. So the power went out for a while. Yeah, the stadium was black.
Wow.
So I mean, and as Dexter mentioned, those lines of communication, if they're cut off, now if one team can't hear, let's say the coach, the sidelines, do they stop play and say, hey, all right, if this one team can't hear, then both teams can't use it? You know what I'm saying? Like, does that change the dynamic of the game? Because it would give a I guess an unfair advantage to one team if one team's comms is good and then the other, it's not working at all.
Can we touch on the family data a little bit too? Like,
sure.
Why? So one piece of the article was saying they claimed they claimed players' family members' data through third-party services. Now that's a little scary too. Like in that data could be somebody's credit card number, home address, email. But now you got to think their family's impacted by that ransomware attack or just stealing of that data. Can we speak to that? What are you guys' thoughts on that? Like,
all right, I'll take it real quick.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, and that was really because even along that same line when we're talking about critical infrastructure, one of the weak points that we even discuss, even when we talk about like for the power grid, a lot of these municipalities, they don't have that same level of there's not that same consistent level of security. Maybe you go from city to city or state to state, wherever the case is. So federal may have a certain standard of security, but then some of these smaller municipalities that are guarding, let's say, they're in charge of, a power grid within their city. They may not have a robust cybersecurity team. So that security posture is going to be affected. It's going to be compromised. They may not even use proper cybersecurity practices. They may not be exercising basic cybersecurity principles when they're trying to when we're talking about guarding, something as precious as the power grid. So I think that this is kind of the same thing here when we're talking about we're talking about in the field of sports where you have you're going to have a lot of third party vendors, even for POS systems. You go into when you're taking a break from the game, you go in to get a beer or get some food or whatever. These are a lot of different companies that are working with the stadium, and then also, of course, then it's going to be working with, like I said, if you're at a baseball game, MLB, NBA, whatever the case may be. So a lot of this trickle down effect comes into play. So let's say the vendor that's in charge of the POS systems that are so you can get your hot dog and drink. What does their cybersecurity structure look like? Like
Right.
who is maintaining? Who's to say to say, hey, if you're gonna work these games, you got to make sure you have XYZ. I don't know. I mean, that's something that comes to mind to me. Like, is that something that's in place? Is that something that's going to be enforced when we're talking about the interconnectivity of systems? Because like now you're using Apple Pay, wireless systems, POS systems, near field communication technologies when we're trying to make purchases now. So there's a lot more. The attack surface is definitely widened when we're talking about the security for within sporting events and arenas.
Yeah, no, it's all good stuff. It's definitely widened. There's so much more that you can hit where it affects families and consumers. And you talk about family. I mean, teams have players' addresses. What if that gets out, Alfredzo, and it gets to the wrong hands and stalker? Now you're talking about somebody's just personal safety, right? Could be some health related information that teams do have access to. That getting out to now, there's HIPAA violations, and that team could get sued, and all. There's so much connected, and I think Dr. Joseph makes a great point in that the scope has just been widened. There's so many more people that can be affected, and when the scope is widened, and there's so many more people that can be affected, and there's so much money, because you always got to follow the money. So much money to be made. I'll keep saying it's like sports is entertainment for us, but it's also a business, right? And just like any other business in a company, you want to protect your valuable information. You want to protect your assets. You want to protect that information at the biggest cost that you can. You're going to try to do that. And with so much money on the line, we're talking about the Super Bowl coming up. Can you imagine? We talked about a potential serious disruption to the Super Bowl or something affecting the integrity of the game in terms of teams being able to compete at the same level. If that happens, like just think about it then how leagues are tied to TV rights and things like that. If that happens and people are like, hey, there's a delay in the game and it's the biggest game of the year for football, now people are turning away. Well, advertisers aren't happy about that. They're going to want to know, hey, I spent a lot of money for my Super Bowl ad. How do we ensure that's not going to happen again? Because now we're getting eyeballs away from the set. That's not what they want. So there's so much tied in and so much to protect. And it really comes down to the money. You can lose money over this. You can lose fans over this, which is tied to money. So it all matters, man.
Absolutely. It makes me wonder what type of cybersecurity professionals they employ, right? So we're talking about it now, but it also makes me wonder, like, if Microsoft is bringing it up and the different Olympics, NFL, MLB situations are written in articles. Which professionals working for these organizations are aware of the threat space as well, like we just discussed. It makes me kind of think like you need to spend money on those professionals to defend these particular arenas and make sure they're bulletproof.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it would shock me to think that these leagues with all the money, especially something like the NFL, right, which makes or the NBA, or when you start getting to these world class, we got the Olympics coming up this summer in Paris, right? When you start getting to these world events, they cannot afford for this to go terribly wrong. So I would think, now I could be wrong, I'm not an expert on this part of the game, but I got to think they're going to try to hire the best that they can. Because especially something like the Olympics or a world event, and I'll put the Super Bowl up in that level too. Not quite the same, but up there. You can't afford for that one to go wrong. If that goes wrong, that is major, major trouble. So I got to think they're trying to hire the best cybersecurity experts, the best people that can be aware of these threats. Because these hackers, right, cybersecurity criminals, they're coming and giving their best. So you gotta, you gotta prepare. It's almost like a sport in it, guys, right?
Right. It's a sport in defending the stadium. It's like literally.
It's literally game day all the time. It's literally game day all the time.
We gotta look how stressful it is to be like a cybersecurity defender for the actual game playing defense.
Right. Yeah,
the whole team.
Yeah, you're strategizing and thinking about what people are going to do. It's funny. It didn't really pop in my head till just now when I said that, but like it is a sport, And the defenders, you're always on the defense. The attackers are on the offense, and you're trying to out strategize them and think what they might do, how they might hit you, or what their motive is and advantage. Yeah, it's like a sport. So
I'm trying not to imagine trying not to imagine a cybersecurity professional doing up downs in front of the screen, trying to get prepped up for defending.
Trying to get ready. I wonder if they're hyped up before. They're like, "Look, guys, this is the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
We got to make sure that there's no attacks."
That'd be a good commercial. That'd be a good Super Bowl plug.
It would be. It might scare some people too, but it's a good one. It's a good
one. So kind of just wrapping up this with a little bit of analysis. So some of the motivations for an attacker that will want to do this. So for cyber criminals, sport entities possess valuable data on athletic performance, competitive advantage, and personal information, making them attractive targets for data breaches and ransomware attacks. Number two, politically motivated threat actors, nation states, and hacktivist groups aim to disrupt events for geopolitical reasons, using DDoS attacks to generate publicity for their causes. And Dexter, that even kind of ties in when we're talking about like these global events like the Olympics. That is a prime opportunity for a cyber criminal to strike. So some cybersecurity recommendations. So number one, you want to augment the SOC team. So continuous monitoring is essential for the vast threat environment, requiring an additional set of eyes around the clock. Two, conduct your cyber risk assessment, identify threats to the event venue or nation involving key stakeholders like third-party vendors, make sure they're up to snuff, venue IT staff and sponsors. Implement strong access management measures, limit access to systems and services to authorized personnel, providing training and access layers. And I'll stop there. And Alfredzo, maybe you can help out with the remainder of those recommendations. Like, what are some of the recommendations in your analysis that you recommend?
Being aware of the geopolitical resonates with me, like why somebody would probably try to take the Olympic systems down or put their particular attacker group banner up during something like that to drive DDoS, right? To drive users there. So mitigating against that would be, defense in depth with a multi-layer framework, like you said, keeping the POS on a separate network, Wi-Fi on another lockdown network, and then all stadium communications, deeper in the onion, in the security onion. User awareness, don't click on this button during this event. Don't use this particular application when you buy your tickets. That's definitely a training thing, but only use our sponsored, site to get purchases for this event. And then more importantly, don't go outside and click third party links that might be trying to hype up the event, right? That, unless they come from us, right? And then close collaboration, I like too. Close collaboration with particular partnering agencies, like you said, those vendors, those POSs, the media groups, the
Right.
the fans that might, the fan sites that might be following the players, know that collaboration exists from the vendor or from the big box sport entity and venue, and then educate, collaboration, like sponsor the collaboration to the actual attendees and the sports fans that come to the event with digital devices. And even the teams, use, like you said, use the Microsoft Surface. It's encrypted. It has your player stats. Don't click outside the site. Don't share with any other particular iPad or community, right?
Don't use it for your personal use.
Right. Don't.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that hits the nail on the head right there.
No, it's good stuff. Good stuff. So looking at the second article we have here, so this is titled "Cyber Tackle NBA Team." The author here is Sarah Coble from the Info Security magazine, dated 26 April 2021. So this is regarding to the attack that happened with the Houston Rockets, NBA team Houston Rockets. I'll just read a quick excerpt here. So an investigation was launched after cyber criminals targeted one of the 30 NBA teams of the NBA. Cybersecurity experts hired by the Houston Rockets are working closely with the Federal Bureau of Investigation to determine the precise nature and extent of the security incident. Reuters reports that an unknown attacker tried to install ransomware on the basketball franchise's internal computer systems, but was largely unsuccessful. So, and I'll stop right there. Quickly, Alfredzo, like,
I think they got the top athletes to come in at that point. When you see
absolutely.
the cybersecurity experts and the FBI, we just called up the top athletes. Let's go. Like we had an event and we stopped everything and we got the pros to come in and help the situation. Right. So it said they hired another team. So that goes back to our internal IT stadium, right? They said, hold on, this looks pretty serious. And then they called up another team and the top athletes together. So the top players came in to bring the Houston systems back into a defensive stance. So I like that. I like hearing that. And I like hearing that it was like first we hit this other external cyber entity and then they hired the FBI. So it was like a draft. It was like a draft to get the Houston systems back online,
But I guess Dexter, what was I guess what stuck out to you? Because like I said, the Houston Rockets employed the FBI to work on this. I mean, to me, that was like major to me.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of what Alfredzo said too, right? Because they're taking this very seriously, and I think that's something you want to see from an organization or a sports organization.
Right.
To my knowledge, up to that point, there really hadn't been something like that had affected an NBA team that directly or think hit so close to home. So I think it's very interesting that that's only 3 years ago, or coming up on 3 years ago, that the Houston Rockets said, okay, we have to take this very seriously. I think as a fan, you want to see that if you're a sports fan. As a player, anybody working in that organization, right, in the front office, anybody working with the team in terms of training, you want to see that your organization is taking this very seriously. So for me to get the FBI involved, it screamed to me either that whether that came from the NBA top down to the Rockets, but that they took this threat very seriously. Luckily, not too much information seemed to be got out there that it was a major threat, but they took it seriously enough to say, let's get the Federal Bureau of Investigations involved in this. And it shows you that, look, that keeps saying it, data's king, information is key. Yeah. And it can really affect the lives of a lot of people. It can also affect a lot of the money, as I keep saying, with a company. But the fact they took this seriously, said, let's get the FBI or the top players, as Alfredzo said, which he's right. Let's get the experts up in here. And they did that. And, were able to assess the situation and do what they needed to do.
So main reason, and I think that's great, the Houston Rockets and really maybe even the NBA to make that move and make that move quickly, because sports teams are attractive targets due to the valuable information that they possess. We already talked about a bit already, talking about ranging from the player data to contracts, operational details, how organizations run. All that is very key information, key data. So looking at the collaboration with law enforcement, so they did work with the FBI, which, like I said, that really was profound to me because it indicated the severity and the significance of this type of cyber attack. Now, learning that, yes, it was a ransomware attack that they tried to get tried to deploy against the Houston Rockets, but it was unsuccessful. But I'll stop right there, Alfredzo. Like, so given the nature of that attack against the Houston Rockets, but given that they were unsuccessful, I think that's sigh of relief that that kind of gives you indication that they do have a good cybersecurity team in place.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and it points to the fact that they were able to detect the ransomware, mitigate any particular encryption. Right, we know they come to encrypt the data, steal it, and ransom it, but then also they were able to bolster up themselves and give. I would think. I mean, we could look into it that they were defended enough to give artifacts to the law enforcement agency. So that's the part I didn't really get from the article. But if they were able to stay in place and push off these actors long enough to get law enforcement response, they had something in there that could keep their data contained, right, and not get encrypted. Maybe they were restoring systems, maybe they were pushing traffic somewhere else, but it's a good shout out to them, and it also highlights to why we know why Houston may be targeted, but how much research did the adversary do on this particular team to try to get the ransomware going? Like what was so lucrative about the Houston team's infrastructure that made them want to go and ransom it, So that resonates as a defender. Like, what did they see in that threat landscape that they wanted to target it intentionally and particularly ransom it to the NBA? Something must have been attractive to them. So that kind of clicked with me in that situation.
At that time, Alfredzo, Houston had, still, one of the top players in the league in James Harden at that time. And I wonder how much of that was of interest to them, because if you can, it's like any other attack or something. If you can get information on one of the best players in the league, and try to hold that, because they tried to hold that for ransom, right? When you make that play, that's extremely valuable, because look, everything's not equal. Player who's high in your league, and and I'm have my hands up high for this, as opposed to a player that's low on the totem pole in the team. Everybody's information is valuable. I'm not saying everybody's information isn't valuable. I'm just saying the cost of it, what it may be, or why they may target. You got what I'm saying? Yeah, it's at a different level. You got what I'm saying? So, I think you were saying that, and I think that's a good question to ask, is why they would have done it. And it's like, well, when you got a top player, it's even more of a threat. I'm out there. I'm sure if somebody got Los Angeles Lakers information in the NBA right now because they have LeBron James, it's got a different value as opposed to somebody who's on the Orlando Magic. Just no shade to Magic or their fans, but it's just different levels to it, just like anything else.
And so I like and really enjoy having you on the show, because you provided that inside sports insight. So now from the cybersecurity insight, looking at this, so for me, what struck to me, as far as Alfredo, as you mentioned, I was thinking about what was the Houston Rockets security that week compared to out of all of the 30 NBA teams, was the Houston Rockets cybersecurity infrastructure or posture that weaker than the rest of the teams, and made them a prime target for them to want to attack Houston Rockets. And of course you have the factors of the players, and those when we're talking about like superstars in the leagues, depending on which team they play, they're going to be more attractive than others. Like, so if you, like Dexter, as you mentioned, some teams that don't really have a superstar, they're not. There's nothing really there. You know what I mean? Like, so, but if you, like you say, if you're talking about Los Angeles Lakers or even New York Knicks, Jalen Brunson, you know what I'm saying? Like, those type of things. So it does depend. Yeah, you do have that aspect of like who's on the team. Like, we're talking about, top players, and also too, like, we're talking about the cybersecurity side of it. Is there a uniform cybersecurity posture amongst, as we're talking about the NBA, amongst all 30 NBA teams? Is there like is there one cybersecurity
that's a good question,
vendor that takes care of them, or is it like separate, or you know what I mean? Yeah, go ahead.
That's a good question.
That is a good question, because to your point, if they were the weakest and they were able to mitigate the ransomware, what happens if their particular vendors differ from the Knicks' vendor? And so in learning lessons, whoever the bad guys are, they take their chops. They lost this round, but they find out the Knicks' perimeter is weaker. and then they're not using the same vendor. Say this is the strongest candidate and they learn their lesson and they come back again and another team is weaker than the Houston's defensive countermeasures. Well, then we're in trouble, right? Because now they've gotten this like probe for effect against Houston, right? And they say, well, they were tough. Let's go at the Knicks, or let's go at a different team that might not have the same posture. Because if you don't use the same vendor, you don't have the same posture.
Can I ask you?
Right.
I'm curious. I want to ask you guys a question because you're the experts in what you do. Do you think it would be better for a league to have different teams use different groups or individuals to protect the information, or should they keep consistent? Like, what do y'all think? I'm very curious about that. Like, what do you think is the best method, or does it vary from league and situation? Like, what do you guys think?
I think that's tough. I mean, can I take it first, Joseph?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's tough because you know, if you use the same vendor, all you have to do is go after that vendor.
Right.
But it's
Right.
more so the best practices of like what services, and I'm even not even liking to admit this, but it would be a boutique for like a customized service offering for the Knicks that won't match, you know, someone in a different area of the country. Almost like how Amazon does it, right? Like you will have a region for, you know, Knicks, East Coast team, Celtics, and then a different vendor the further south you go. Right. And
Right.
now it will be the same cybersecurity defensive countermeasures and everything, bolstering up to match Houston's or exceed Houston's capability, but it wouldn't be the same vendor. I don't like vendor locked in particularly because all you got to do is go after that person and you get everybody.
Right.
know?
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. Yeah.
I would definitely agree with Alfredzo there. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend having one single vendor to be in charge of all 30 teams. So in this case, we're talking about the NBA. I think you would even stress out that one vendor.
Oh, yeah.
They're gonna be spread thin. I mean, to do all those teams and also like just all the, you know, the metadata that that's accompanied with each and every single team. I think that's too much for. Maybe they might do 2 teams, maybe, but I wouldn't say all 30. I think that's stretching them thin. And Alfredo, you said, I mean, a cyber attack would be like, okay, company X is taking care of all NBA. All right, let's all gang up on. Yeah, exactly. Get them. You know what I mean? They just bull rush like that one.
That NFL tackle.
Right.
Take them out right now.
Right. That makes sense. It doesn't seem like it would make sense for a vendor. I just felt like I thought about that part, Dr. Joseph, that they would be too stressed. And then also the vulnerability aspect, as Alfredo mentioned, in the fact that, all right, well, yeah, you take out one, you know what the game is for this. We take out everybody. And that's not good for anybody. So no, it makes sense. Thank y'all for answering the question. I know it's y'all podcast, but thank you.
That's what we're here for, man. You know, that's a tough one. It's a tough one to even think about as a professional. And then we could probably come back to later, but then what do you do at the Olympics? Right now, you know, it's something I didn't even think about until this episode too. Like I would have never thought of the geopolitical aspect. I mean, I probably would have if it was like a hospital or some other target, but now you open up the Pandora's box of, well, is that happening today? I always come back to like, are they separated? What teams are split up between, you know, coastal and regional teams? But then also now we go across the pond. You know, what are they doing on that side? Because we might disagree or agree on certain events, you know.
And there's going to be a lot of different, you know, when we're talking about like, you know, international play, there's a lot of international rules that pertain to cybersecurity. So there's a lot of different things that come to play. And depending on where, and where is it hosted? Is it? I think it's Paris.
Paris this year.
Paris. Okay. Yeah. Paris. So yeah, we're talking about different cybersecurity rules according to where you're located. So yeah, so that definitely going to come into play. So kind of going down this article here. So so Bloomberg reported that the hacking group Babook, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, claims to have exfiltrated 500 gigabytes of data belonging to the Houston Rockets. Babook alleged that the information it had swiped from the team included financial data, non-disclosure agreements and contracts. The gang claimed on its dark page that it would not return the data to the basketball franchise until a ransom was paid. In a message that was later removed, the gang said that failure to pay would result in publication of the stolen information. I mean, this is rudimentary, you know. This is a ransomware, you know, one-on-one. The team said that if the investigation reveals that any personal data was stolen, then those affected would be notified. And again, we had talked about that ransomware attack was mitigated, but yeah, it's these type of things, I think it should be an alert. I don't know to say a way. I guess maybe a wake up call.
Yeah,
if
definitely.
I dare to say, because. So yeah, I mean, a cyber criminal could be maybe their case in it, trying to see, okay, I was unsuccessful with the Houston Rockets. Let me try the Oklahoma City Thunder, or because their defenses are down. See how far they can get, and they just keep trying, because in terms of the NBA, the landscape is quite large. So you have 30 teams. All right, I didn't get it with one. I'm gonna try another. And see how far they can get. So they're not gonna stop. They're gonna keep trying. And I think as cyber defense professionals, you have to be on your P's and Q's and know that these cyber criminals they're gonna be persistent and going to keep trying. And every single team has to be on alert, because, like I said, just because you may got been lucky, that they weren't successful with the Houston Rockets, but they could try to attack another team that try to see if they could catch them slipping.
Yep.
I always think, what does this Babu group have against the Houston Rockets? Like, why, why come out of nowhere and try to take 500 gigs from somebody, a team in particular? And then I also hope that, when the Houston Rockets recognize this attack, that they kind of build a profile, like what they try to use to get the data. Since their defenses were in place, I'm hoping they profiled the threat actor and was like, we've seen this traffic before. We've seen somebody that looked like this in 2021. Here it is again in 2024. Because I think even I lose that as a cybersecurity professional. These guys have capabilities that they're trying to test out on the other 29 teams. So maybe Houston can give another team a heads up, like, these guys came after us in 2021. It looks exactly the same. Maybe a different name, because they do change names too, as we know in Ransomware 101. But maybe that we would like to say that's the threat intelligence that they would share across the NBA. That's the part I'm missing in this article, to hope that they do share these particular attack vectors and groups across the other 29 teams to bolster their defenses. That's what the hope would be.
I'd hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's wrap up this article. So there were other notable attempts or cyber attacks. So included the Memorial Hermann Health System and the Texas Children's Hospital. They experienced data breaches, which underscores the broader cybersecurity challenges faced by organizations in the region. The mention of a ransomware attack on the Texas court system in 2020 further highlights persistent and evolving nature of cyber threats. So we go to this last article, and so this one is titled "NBA League Fans' Personal Information Via Data Breach at Newsletter Service." So the author is Alicia Hope from CPO Magazine. This is dated back in 29 March 2023. And I quickly read. So the NBA is warning fans of a data breach that leaked their personal information from a third-party newsletter service. In a cybersecurity incident alert, the NBA said it discovered an unauthorized party gained access and obtained fans' personally identifiable information, or PII, from a third-party service. While most famous for the North American Men's Basketball League, the NBA is a global sports and media organization, managing several professional sports leagues, including, of course, NBA, WNBA, NBA G League, NBA 2K League, and Basketball Africa League. So we talked about this already quite a bit as far as the vulnerability when you have like these third party vendors employed to support, so in this case the NBA, that are taking care of different aspects of a team, of the arena. What is their cybersecurity posture like? You know what I mean? Like, we don't know if there's a uniform set of security principles set for every vendor. Is there a standard that each one has to maintain or meet and maintain, I should say, when they want to work with the NBA or the NFL or MLB or whatever the case may be? So Alfredzo, like, what are some of your thoughts here?
I just straight up think it sucks that it was a newsletter, right? That's something that's a crafty. Somebody's gonna get that newsletter to get all the information on those organizations that you mentioned, all the professional leagues, the player stats, even some of those integrations to a letter. Makes it really suck that somebody's personal information was breached to that company. So I hate to be rough on them. They wouldn't be a letter no more. I mean, I hate to say that they would have to bolster their defenses before they can come back and do the newslettership again, because now someone knows you've been breached and they know you have access to all of this PII. Well, you got to step your game up before you can remain a letter. Unfortunately, I hate to be rough on them, but for me, it would be like you can't be a newsletter anymore until you bolster those defenses, because now first of all, the third party data blew my mind, right? The personal data is out there, but now people know you had a breach. Now people know they can get that data from you specifically. Well, we got to scratch that until you bolster your cyber defenses. So it would be a change of the service or shutting down of the service until they step their game up, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd hope that's the action they would take. I think one of my takeaways from that, Alfredzo, is that when you have newsletters, that is a great way as an organization to get information. You get people's email, you might get access to other things that they may sign up through that. So it's almost interesting that while that's a great way to get information, the cyber criminals in this situation thought about that and said, this could be a weak spot, and because we know there's information there, we at least might be able to hit them and get a bunch of stuff there. So it's interesting that they kind of thought the way of how the company was thinking about a great way probably to get information in a positive way, and they tried to use that for a negative. So it's really interesting, and it makes you think about what you have to protect as well too. Even something may seem as insignificant as a newsletter. And I think you're right. The customers, the fans in this situation who are signing up for newsletter, I don't think they'd want that newsletter anymore, knowing that the information's been compromised. Exactly. And you're right. It's going to take some time to build that trust again with information, because that's something you can lose besides just money in a business situation, is just the trust. So that's also something interesting, I think, for teams to consider.
Yeah. So and I'll just sum this up real quick. But so sports organizations, they're frequent targets for cyber criminals. The UK survey revealed that 70% of respondents in the industry have experienced cyber incidents. Geopolitical motivations also come into play, demonstrated by the Russian military intelligence agency GRU hacking the Swedish Sports Confederation in 2017-2018. So in the context of a recent NBA data breach, Eric Krohn from KnowBe4 attributes it to an internal security lapse by a vendor rather than a sophisticated external threat, emphasizing the commonality of such incidents, but noting limited public disclosure in this particular case. This is something, I think I'm definitely going to pay more attention to as we're talking about cybersecurity and within the sports world, especially as, like I said, that digital landscape is increasing. We're using more, like all sports leagues are coming more and more modernized. Like the NFL dealing with Amazon. You see all the quick stats, the analytical stats. They even put it within the game as you're watching.
Yep.
They do percentages of the percentage likelihood of the quarterback making a play or scoring a field goal or things like that. So a lot of these different things, a lot of these data points. And with that, in order to get that data, there's sensors all around within the arenas, cameras all over the place in order to collect that and make that type of prediction. But no, I think this is something to definitely watch for, and I think it's only gonna get, I guess, worse.
The battle's going to increase.
It's sign up for that pain now before we sign up for it later.
It's gonna get more competitive, right? Like the battle's going to increase, So it's definitely something to watch for sure.
I'm going to try to pay more attention to the geopolitical impact too. That that was in the back of my mind, but I would never thought the sports event would have that objective, right? So I'm definitely going to also pay attention to the geopolitical aspect and the trust, right? You hit the nail on the head, Dexter. The trust in the NBA or at NBA.com opposed to something that looks fake from the NBA, right? We have to understand that this is coming from their particular brand and know that there could be somebody attacking the brand geopolitically, right? Like I would never thought that somebody would have put the two together, like you said, and attack the services that they use to get their agenda out there. So I'm definitely going to pay attention to that too.